and thebarnauburn.com. Two team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. CoverCrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Twin Peaks is the best in the game. Here, you're in the red zone for every college rivalry and divisional matchup all season long. I mean, where else are the scenic views as good as your view of the game? Only at Twin Peaks, the #1 sports bar.
Start your day online with our website, nextroundlive.com, for the latest videos, podcasts, and college football stories. It's also a great way to stream the show or shop in the Next Round store. Stay connected by visiting nextroundlive.com.
Follow Brownie on Twitter and Instagram at ryanbrownlive.
All right, it's another Monday after a college football weekend, which means it is time for the Middle Eight with Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports, 24/7 Sports. I'm Ryan Brown. The show presented by MyBookie.ag, one of the most important times of the game. Last 4 minutes the first half, first 4 minutes of the second half. They call that the Middle Eight. We do it every Monday morning at 8 o'clock Central Time. What is up, Brandon? How are you today?
Doing very well. How are you, Ryan?
Doing fantastic. Boy, another fun weekend of college football. I don't want to talk about this upcoming weekend. Doesn't look like it's going to be as much fun. We'll get to that later. We'll save that for the end of the show. Let's talk about what we saw over the weekend. And I'll start in Oxford. I mean, there were several big outcomes that are going to be meaningful, excuse me, I think, to the college football playoff picture, but probably none more meaningful than what happened in Oxford, because I would say, Brandon, and you've been around the SEC a while, you spent some time in the beautiful state of Mississippi. In my mind, it's the biggest Ole Miss win of my lifetime, and it might be the biggest in program history. I'm no historian of Ole Miss football, but I've been on this planet for 48 years. I've never seen the Rebs have what I think is a bigger win than that one right there.
Yeah, when you contextually put it that way, as far as what was at stake and everything, yeah, absolutely. There hadn't really been a bigger game there since, oh goodness, I forget what year it was, but Eli Manning, when they were actually in the SEC West race.
That was 03, wasn't it? 03 when LSU came in?
Yeah, LSU came to town, right? Yeah. Exactly. That game was huge. So this is a generational game for them, and maybe the biggest game ever when you look at everything and what it sets up. I mean, they looked like a playoff team. They have looked like a playoff team for the last 3 to 4 weeks when you've watched them. I've seen them in person earlier this season. They came into Arkansas, absolutely stomped them, put up so many freaking points. And at the time, Lane Kiffin told us after that game, listen, when we don't make mistakes, we're one of the best teams in the country. He says we're 2 plays away from maybe being the number 1, 2, or 3 team in the country. And people kind of laughed at that, and certainly you will, because, you know, everybody likes to look back with hindsight. But, man, against Georgia, they did everything right. Not just offensively. People look at that. They just kind of look at Ole Miss and go, that's an offensive team. And I know a lot of people know now that they play great defense, but it's insane the kind of stats they're putting up. 23 sacks in the last 3 games. They had 5 sacks against Georgia, frustrated Carson Beck, and the only way Georgia was able to score in the end zone was because of a short field to open the game after the interception. That defensive line for Ole Miss is playing championship-level football, and I think it's kind of difficult to argue at this point. Ole Miss has the best defensive line in the SEC. And I'm not so sure a lot of us ever expected to hear that come out of our mouths under Lane Kiffin.
You know, I go back to Dallas and SEC Media Days, and that was one of the takeaway quotes from Nick Saban in doing some of his first work for ESPN, when he said he viewed Ole Miss as a championship-level team for that very reason. He's like, he said they've not been good enough up front, and now they are defensively. He goes, I've looked at those guys. They're good enough up front defensively. And it really showed Saturday. I mean, Georgia just had no idea. They could not protect Beck. They got beat at left tackle time and time again. That was the difference. That was, and Pete Golding In this state where I live, he took a beating as Alabama's defensive coordinator, but Pete Golding's done a heck of a job this year with that Ole Miss defense.
Yeah, it's amazing how much talent makes you look better as a coach, right?
Yes.
I look at Florida State. They just fired pretty much their entire staff.
That's right.
Those guys didn't forget how to coach. It's the talent this year there. And listen, they made a concerted effort this past offseason, and Lane Kiffin said so after the game, that they just said, we got to recruit differently. We got to get to the transfer portal and get some big bodies, go get some of those big body types to help us win in this league. And it was because of the way they lost to Georgia last season that motivated them. And we all knew on paper that Ole Miss had built a championship-type team. Like every weakness that they had last season, they fixed that through the portal, and we're all just sitting there. And that's why a lot of us thought, hey, Ole Miss has an opportunity to win the SEC title this year, and anything less than going to the college football playoff would be a disappointment. That's why when they got those 2 early losses, we were all sitting there going, man, this season's already a disappointment for them. There's no way they win out now. There's no way they beat Georgia with the way they've been playing. But credit to them. They turned things around, obviously. They're playing better. And I think that the key for them hasn't necessarily been getting the offense going, because that was the big thing in the Kentucky loss. It's like, well, the offense isn't there. What's happening? The big thing for them that sparked them was getting pressure on other quarterbacks, putting their offense in very good positions, and it kind of just sparked everything from there.
They had every reason, though, to pack it up and be done. I mean, that could not have started any worse for them. With the interception, just terrible offensive possession. It's raining. It's sloppy. You throw the interception. Georgia just imposes their will, runs it down your throat for whatever that short field was, 30-some-odd yards. Jackson Dart is hurt. You've got your backup. He's in the locker room hurt. He's not in the tent hurt. Like, he has left the field. It looks like it may be Simmons' game the rest of the game at one point. I mean, you had every reason to pack it in. I can't credit Ole Miss enough for 2 things. Number one, not packing it in. But then number 2, when the backup came in, Lane Kiffin gave him the playbook and said, I'm just going to keep calling plays. And the kid delivered. But, you didn't go into a shell. You didn't not trust your players. Lane Kiffin trusted his backup. And sure enough, he led a scoring drive, and it sparked that team. Even when Dart came back in, they were a different team.
Yep, absolutely. And that was, we always talk about turning point in games, but that was a turning point.
No doubt.
Early in the game, very early, you turn the ball over, give Georgia a short field, they just absolutely devour you, and you're going, well, what next? Well, we're just going to run our pre-scripted plays. Every coach scripts out offensively the first 7 to 11 plays to a game. And Lane Kiffin did not toss that out just because Jackson Dart got hurt and threw that interception. He said, we're going to run what we're going to run because we know what's going to work. And obviously the backups, every backup on that team, every team in college football knows exactly what that script's going to look like. They've been had it hammered home to them day after day during the week. And when Lane Kiffin said they've been preparing for that game for a year, I believe it. And I'm certain that those players were honed in on that, every single player. Walk on to backups. They knew what they had to execute, and they were ready for that moment and that position. And, that's the thing. It is very easy for a coach, especially a head coach who's also calling the plays, to kind of overthink things a little bit and start thinking, hey, you know what? I'm putting my backup in here. It's wet. It's a little weird in here. Let's just kind of go back into our shell a little bit until maybe I hear in my headset, Jackson Dart is okay and might be able to come back in. We talk about the SEC. It reminds me a lot of what Mizzou did when Brady Cook went out about a month ago or so. He went in the locker room, went to the hospital even, and they gave him an MRI and, shot him up or whatever to get him back in there. I don't know if that's what happened to Jackson Dart, but you've seen a lot of quarterbacks. It just tells you, in this era where we talk about the transfer portal and money and kids caring about money, all this, man, these kids every single week are sacrificing their body to win. And when they're in positions to win and they've been preparing all their lives for it and looking forward to something, they'll do anything possible to stay out there and play. And that's what I love about college football. Everybody seems to think it's turned into this NFL light and all this, and in some ways it is. But, man, the desire and the love for the game still comes through. And we saw that with Jackson Dart coming back out of the locker room.
All right, let's talk about the Georgia aspect of this. It is right to focus on what Ole Miss did. They're right back in the college football playoff picture. They did not get eliminated. But there sits Georgia, a team we are so programmed to see as just this machine that just reloads year after year after year. They're not particularly good at receiver. I'm not sure that they're good at quarterback. I mean, Carson Beck is not playing good football over the last month and a half. Their defense is good, but it's not as dominant as it has been. This is not a photocopy of the Georgia team we've seen over the last 5 years.
Well, I think it's a photocopy of a photocopy. And
it's lost resolution.
That's the problem, is that it's just not as good as the original. They've had multiple turnovers in 4 straight games for the first time since 2020, and we know how that season went for them. Georgia's problem, listen, I do think they need more talented receivers, but their problem is Carson Beck. He's regressed since last season, in my opinion. He has fallen down draft boards in the NFL. He's throwing interceptions like crazy. He's fumbling the ball. He's got the most interceptions, I believe, in a 6-game stretch here since 2000. What was it? It's Matt Corral, right?
Ole Miss. That was him, yeah.
I mean, that's a quarterback problem. There's been a lot worse quarterbacks with worse receivers in the SEC during that time that have thrown less interceptions, and that's a Carson Beck issue. And we've seen that most of the season, even in the season opener. The question has been, how's he going to deal with not having Ladd McConkey and Brock Bowers out there, and he seemingly still doesn't have a lot of trust with his other receivers. That's a big issue to be having at any point in the season, let alone in November. Having said that, Georgia still has an incredible roster capable of winning a championship this year. Let's not forget what the hell that defense did at Texas just a few weeks ago, where they were all over the field pursuing the ball. I just think that Ole Miss, with Lane Kiffin offensively as a play caller, he's going to get guys open no matter what. And I think a lot of us obviously wrote off Ole Miss when they lost those 2 games. But I think even more so with Trey Harris being out at receiver, we thought that they had no chance in some games, especially against Georgia on paper. But Lane Kiffin just did what he does. He moved receivers around. He moved guys from the outside into the slot to get some better matchup advantages at receiver. And he just schemes guys open. He's one of the few play callers in the SEC that no matter the talent level, which they have incredible talent at Ole Miss, I'm not saying that, but no matter the talent level, he schemes guys open for his quarterbacks. There's only 2 or 3 guys like that in the SEC. Kiffin's one of them, and Georgia, he was going to get his against Georgia. It was going to be really up to Carson Beck to deliver for them on the road, and once again, a multiple turnover game from him, and he's regressed since last season. I'm sorry to say it. I mean, I thought coming into this year he was going to be the best quarterback in the SEC. He had the quickest release out of anybody in the country last season, getting the ball out quickly, making quick decisions. It's not there this season.
You know, I just – and the one unit I left out when I listed all the things that aren't up to what we expect Georgia to be was the offensive line. And
offensive line, yeah.
Yeah, and it's not good. I mean, it got exposed very, very badly in that game, as we mentioned earlier. And now just to briefly look ahead, they play a really good front against Tennessee and what is now a must-win game for Georgia. They have no mulligans left. And oddly, Tennessee comes into that game maybe not in a must-win situation. I don't think we ever thought it would have played out that way. I mean, I know Nico is injured, but just from the prospect of facing that Tennessee defense, they can do a lot of things to Georgia that Ole Miss did.
Yeah, the defensive lines are very comparable. You're exactly right. I mean, they believe there that defensive line's the best they've had since the late 90s, early 2000s, and that's what's really kept them in games too, as their offense has just struggled since the non-conference season. I know they put up 30-plus points against Mississippi State, but they're the worst team in the SEC. They're still having some problems there offensively. And so for Georgia, it's not necessarily a question about their defense slowing Tennessee. It's going to be, can your offense score against Tennessee's defense? Can your offensive line hold up against Tennessee's defensive line? this is very much a similar style of game and in preparation to the Ole Miss game. But the good thing for Georgia is it's in Athens, and you're facing a much less explosive, less schematically excellent offensive game plan from Tennessee. I hate to say it. I love Josh Heupel, but quarterbacks that have played in the system have always told me that they just kind of, it's either a screen or it's everything down the field. You're just throwing to a piece of grass and running to it. Little bit different, but Tennessee, for them, they've got to be able to score points against Georgia. They got to be able to score 4 touchdowns, I think, to beat Georgia and give them some help there on the road. But, Georgia's in must-win mode. Tennessee has some space here to maneuver potentially. It's going to be interesting to see if, we talk about hypotheticals. In my brain, I'm thinking, what happens if Georgia wins that game by a healthy margin against Tennessee? Where does that put Tennessee in the CFP rankings the week after that? And then for that matter, obviously, in the next couple weeks after that, are we opening ourselves up for, maybe one more team in the playoff than maybe we were expecting? Probably not, but it's going to be interesting just as far as seeding, I guess I could say.
Well, and one thing you're kind of hinting at, and these things in college football always finds a way to fall backwards into the right situation, as hard as they sometimes try to mess it up. So these things normally work themselves out, but the SEC is screaming towards finishing the season with like 6 2-loss teams in conference play, and it's going to create an interesting tiebreaker just to determine who goes to Atlanta. And then there's a chance you add another 2-loss team out of Atlanta, or you end up with a 3-loss team that played in your championship game. There's a lot of mess there that could happen, but I mean, we are screaming towards, like, there's a chance you've got 5 or 6 2-loss teams in the final SEC standings.
Yeah, and there's still an opportunity here for there to be an 8-way tie.
Yes.
Which I wrote today would be, it would give even the best of mathematicians a migraine trying to figure out the tiebreaker scenarios with that. I'll throw this out there. Listen, at some point, we either need to go back to divisions in college football with these big conferences, Big Ten included, or these conferences, which want more money, need to create their own playoff for their championship. Create a 4-team playoff going into your SEC championship game. Put your top 4 teams, seed them in there. Of course, you're still going to have tiebreakers and all that. But do that. Let's do a 4-team playoff for your SEC champion. Do that. I think, obviously, that's a moneymaker for you. But also, I think it even creates more drama going into the final 2 to 3 weeks of the season. And it kind of alleviates some of that pressure or the tiebreaker scenarios. If you do not want divisions, if for whatever reason you don't want to do divisions, do that. And I think at some point, some conference is going to do that with enough teams.
Interesting. Brandon's an idea man. I like that, an idea guy.
And I'm not just saying that. Yeah. That's stuff that's been talked about.
Okay.
Behind closed doors elsewhere.
More meaningful football. You will never get me arguing against it, Brandon. You will never hear Ryan Brown say, "I've never been one of the we got too many bowls guys." I'm like, if you think we got too many bowls, you pick the 8 you don't want to watch and don't watch them. But I am never going to complain about more football on my TV. Never, ever, ever, ever. You will never hear me complain about it.
No, I agree. The problem is it's just the calendar and all that.
Sure.
But the SEC, if they're going to stick to 8 conference games, there's an opportunity there potentially to do something like that. And this goes back to, listen, all the way back in 2020, 2021, when Greg Sankey asked all his ADs and presidents, let's have blue sky thinking. Anything's possible. Nothing's standing in your way. What are some of your ideas? And that's something that was bandied about among some folks, not just necessarily for an SEC championship, but, hey, maybe we do our own playoff with another conference or something like that if the current system doesn't work out. But again, that was blue sky thinking. But at the very least, that idea has been floating out there. And all it takes is 1 or 2 seasons of some weird chaos or weird tiebreaker scenarios, as we're potentially looking at here in the SEC, for people to go back and to look at that and go, maybe that is a good idea.
All right, we'll talk Alabama's win at LSU next. A reminder, the show is presented by MyBookie.ag. It is the Middle 8 presented by MyBookie.ag. Code NEXTROUND when you sign on there, and you get that sign-on bonus. They will double your initial deposit. You make that first deposit, they double it with code NEXTROUND at MyBookie.ag. Money you can play with right away, including tonight's Monday Night Football game. The Rams playing host to the Dolphins. Rams favored by 2.5. Clearly wrong team favored in that one, if you ask me.
Hey, by the way, real quick on that. Every single FBS and FCS team in the state of Florida did not win a single game for the first time, I think, ever. It's up to the Dolphins tonight to rectify that, to correct that. It is up to Miami to make sure history does not happen.
And the Buccaneers lost to the 49ers, and the Jags lost to the Vikings. This is a bad sign. I don't like this kind of pressure on my team. We normally don't handle this very well. Holy crap, Brandon, you've ruined my Monday already, and we're not even till 9 o'clock Central. MyBookie.ag, code next round. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code next round. All right, it was an elimination game in Baton Rouge. The Alabama Crimson Tide going to LSU, and the loser picks up loss number 3 is not going to be a factor in the college football playoff. Though in LSU's case, they could still finish in that 2-loss tie in the SEC. That was not going to be the case for Alabama. It would have been their 3rd SEC loss. So backs against the wall for both teams, and one team played like it, one team did not. What a dominant performance by Alabama. Could not have been more impressed with what the Crimson Tide did on the road.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say? Absolute blowout and absolute dominance. When LSU got something going, Alabama would either force a turnover. I keep thinking back to that great interception there in the end zone that Garrett, I'm going to tell, I think a lot of us are crapping on Garrett Nussmeier for that throw, but if you watch it from his viewpoint, I mean, the guy is literally going this way and it's kind of down, and then the ball comes out and he just comes up and gets it.
Yep.
I mean, there's nothing he could really do, Nussmeier there. But here's the issue with LSU, and listen, let's just stop talking about them as a playoff team now. I'm not going to talk about them the rest of the season. Their issue is that they can't stop running quarterbacks. They haven't been able to all season. We go back to that A&M game, and the big quote coming out of that was, "Oh, we didn't really practice for Marcel Reed, the Texas A&M quarterback, and what he does on the ground." It's like, you did what? You didn't do what? You had the highest paid defensive coordinator in the country that you stole from Mizzou and went after a couple different times to try and get, and you didn't prepare for that. And then against Alabama, you very well damn knew you were going to be preparing for that with Jalen Milroe, and you had no damn answer for him at all. That's a personnel and a schematic issue for LSU, and completely write them off the playoff radar at this point. And obviously the SEC race in my eyes, I just don't see how they really rebound from this. And from the LSU standpoint, what a freaking disappointment for them. Everything was set up for them to win this game. Night game, of course, there in Tiger Stadium. You have your fake-ass paper tiger, mail-order tiger that you got from the state of Florida, from the Tiger King himself, I guess, or Mary Carol Baskin or something. Just this rent a tiger, and you put up a performance like that in the rain. And here's the thing. Going into that game, because of the conditions, it favored Alabama from the get-go. They can run the ball with much more effectiveness than LSU. They have been able to all season. And but Milroe, man, it's just whenever he sees an LSU Tiger across the line of scrimmage, I guess he just wants to run. 8 touchdowns rushing in the last 2 games. First quarterback this century to rush for 4 touchdowns or more in back-to-back seasons against the same opponent. Just a masterclass from Alabama. And the other thing, how about that Alabama defense, the way they were pursuing the ball throughout that damn game? They were smothering. That's the type of Alabama defense we were accustomed to seeing in the past, and it's creeping back up these last few weeks, isn't it? It's coming back a little bit.
They've given up 1 touchdown through the last 8 quarters, and that was, the garbage time touchdown at the end. Garbage time. Yeah, garbage time. It counts 7 either way, but it's a garbage time touchdown at the end. They shut out Missouri, and they made an effort to shut out Missouri. And I wondered, we touched on this on the show on the next round last week. Was that kind of a turning point for Alabama's defense that Kane Womack put his starters back in against Missouri, also in garbage time, to prevent that, just to set that mindset of this is our expectation? You wonder, how that pays dividends down the road for Alabama.
I love that. I love that shit, man. Yeah. I love it. I love it when a coach does that, when you're in a situation of, listen, we got an opportunity here to hang our hat on something. put our freaking starters back in there and challenge them. And they have responded to that. Absolutely. I do think that is a key point you just made. That was sticking out in my mind when LSU was driving there late. I was all like, put those guys back in, do it again. But much different situation there on the road. Yeah, just fantastic stuff. Kane Womack really responding well. I think there were some questions about him, just a month ago about what was going on with that defense. But they've responded so well. Again, just the pursuit of the ball in that game against LSU was elite. That was the type of defense you got to play to win a national championship. And these last 2 to 3 weeks, they are up to that snuff.
Let's talk about LSU. If I'm an LSU fan, and I look at this pragmatically over the last 3 years, I've paid Brian Kelly a lot of money. I've been to an SEC championship game, which was exciting. I lost, obviously.
Yeah.
I haven't been to a college football playoff. I'm not going to make an expanded college football playoff. I had a Heisman Trophy winner. That is also exciting. I didn't get a ton to show for that team-wise. Where do you think the LSU fan base is with Brian Kelly right now?
Frustrated, but obviously wanting to give him another year or two.
Yeah.
Just very frustrated. I think that maybe some fans are probably, I hate to say it, maybe I'm going to an extreme here. They're getting like flashbacks to the pre-Saban era there where things were just so damn inconsistent year to year. And that you start wondering, are we building or regressing back to that a little bit? Are we getting back to that point because other programs are making incremental progress around us and we're just kind of stagnant, and then we're not putting together full performances and now we're losing games? What does that bear for the future? That concerns me, and that certainly concerns the LSU fans. And it's also not just that they're losing, but it's the way they're losing. They're getting their ass kicked in the big games. A&M, Alabama. I mean, we all went into this season against USC thinking, well, you know what? The defense looks better. They seem to be performing better. This looks like a team that could contend, but no, it's not. They've just kind of fallen apart in these big games, and has a lot to do with that defense. I thought the defense was so much better after the first few weeks of the season. It just hasn't quite been there. And again, I go back to them just not being able to defend dual threat quarterbacks. Marcel Reed, Jalen Milroe, Lenora Sellers.
That's right.
For that matter. Those have all been games that they have just really struggled in, and it's because of dual threat quarterbacks. And I mean, that's something that you should be able to scheme for, right? I mean, that seems to be more of a scheme issue than personnel. But is LSU at this point becoming more like Auburn in the past, where it's just like you're real hot one year and then maybe for a year or two you're just really damn cold, and you always got the type of talent there to maybe contend, but it's just a matter of like catching some breaks here and there, and it's almost like an unexpected season when you do break through. I think LSU's maybe moving toward that. They've got they're going to have the talent every year. It's just, can they consistently win year to year? That's a concern for me. And the other thing is this is year 3 for Brian Kelly. And in the past, his year 3s at every school he's been at have been either the peak for him or it's been the tone setter. He's won 10 games plus everywhere he's gone. In year 3, he's had 2 undefeated regular seasons in year 3 at places he's been, including at Notre Dame. And here at LSU, it certainly looks like they're probably not going to get to 10 wins. They'd have to win their bowl game and win out. And that's going to break potentially the longest current active streak among head coaches with 10-win seasons at 7 seasons. I think they got to do some soul searching there this offseason. It's going to be interesting to see kind of how they attack this offseason. I mean, they've already spent all that money on the staff. What are they going to do in the transfer portal potentially to revamp things, maybe to fix that defense? And what about quarterback? I mean, they're struggling there. I mean, as much as we were crapping on Carson Beck earlier, Garrett Nussmeier hasn't been much better. He's had, let's see here, 4 of the last 5 games, he's had 2 interceptions or more. That doesn't cut it at any SEC program.
Especially, you mentioned the Deontay Lawson play was just a heck of a play, but still, I mean, that's a red zone interception. You cannot give away points in games like that. That just is, those are killers.
And the penalties, too.
Yeah.
Just weird, ill-timed penalties. And that's been going on all year, too, for them. It's just the inconsistencies in big situations is baffling to me with them, especially with a coach like Brian Kelly that, I go back to with him slamming his fist on the table.
Why do we do that? Yeah,
he can't figure it out.
Yeah.
That's concerning.
That's scary. That is scary. All right, we got a lot more to get to. A reminder, the show, Middle 8, presented by MyBookie.ag. Code NEXTROUND. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag. When you use code NEXTROUND, you make your initial deposit. They double that deposit. Code NEXTROUND at MyBookie.ag. Monday Night Football, college football, everything at MyBookie.ag. Code NEXTROUND. Also a reminder about Roback. The gift-giving season is coming up, and you can give the gift of Roback, and we're going to help you save when you do it. Roback.com. Code TNR20, and you save with Roback.com. All the great golf polos, the quarter zips, the hoodies, all of that. They've got pants now as well. Roback.com, code TNR20, TNR20 to save at Roback.com. All right, what does the Miami loss mean for the ACC? Colorado controls their own destiny. BYU got screwed, Utah got screwed, and they want you to know about it. All of that in the next half hour. It is the Middle 8 with Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports.
Follow LT on Twitter at @thelancetaylor.
There's only one Champy's world famous fried chicken. Poor boy's tenders, full fried chicken plates, and a little bit of the Mississippi Delta with chicken on a stick and hot tamales. On your way to or from the big game on Highway 119 in Alabaster, stop by Champy's Chicken.
Are you tired of buying your CPAP mask and supplies online only to be disappointed? It's time to visit CPAP Plus, your locally owned and operated CPAP shop that prides itself on personal service. Come see what you're buying at CPAP Plus with 3 convenient locations in Pelham, Highway 280, and now open in Trustful. Drop by for a free CPAP checkup and free filters, no appointment needed. Plus, sign up for their giveaway for a chance to win a free travel CPAP machine. Just Google CPAP Plus or visit any of those 3 locations.
Hey, you. It's the holidays. Give cheer a lift. And at New Balance Birmingham, we got the gift. That holiday vibe? Find it inside. Come together at New Balance Birmingham on Highway 280, right next to Chick-fil-A. New Balance Birmingham, we got now.
This hour of The Next Round is presented by the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, now featuring 7 days of giveaways with your chance to win a share of up to $125,000. The more you visit the Birmingham Racecourse Casino, the more chances you have to win.
Storm season is here. Make sure you have a plan of action in place right now. Greg from Pell City and Storm Restoration Roofing should be your first call when storms hit. Insurance companies love working with Storm Restoration Roofing because of Greg Nelson's name and reputation in the industry. When storms hit, call Greg Nelson. He's local, 205-542-3531. He's the home of the free no-cost roof inspection. Greg from Pell City on Facebook, 205-542-3531. It's Storm Restoration Roofing.
In some places, football is a sport. In Alabama, it's a fine art. New Life Art is proud to announce Daniel A. Moore's upcoming painting, Deuces Wild. This season, Bama is blessed with a pair of very talented deuces. The pair played a huge role on both sides of the ball in the Tide's amazing 41-34 victory over number 2 Georgia. Deuces Wild will portray the unbelievable game-winning 75-yard touchdown catch by deuce number 1, Ryan Williams, late in the 4th quarter. The Dogs' last chance drive was stopped by deuce number 2, Sabian Brown, as he made the game-saving interception in the end zone, which will be celebrated by a small artist's remark in the bottom margin of each print. Go to danielmooreart.com to see the artist's preliminary sketch and take advantage of special pre-publication pricing for Deuces Wild. Also available, The Legend, Daniel Moore's final tribute to Coach Nick Saban. Order now at danielmooreart.com.
Our friends at Milo's Hamburger invites you to join them in the fight against hunger in our local communities by bringing non-perishable food items to your local Milo's, including canned goods. When you donate a canned good or any non-perishable food item, Milo's will give you a free drink. Together, we can make a difference.
Happy football season. At the Next Round, we strive to make our loyal listeners feel like they're a part of the action all season long. My name is Emily Grace McWhorter, and I do that by bringing you along for any given Saturday in Auburn or Tuscaloosa. From pregame warm-ups, touchdowns that make you feel a part of the play, and everything in between, our goal is to make you feel like you're inside Bryant Denny or Jordan Hare. Follow along on our social media at Next Round Live on Instagram, X, and Facebook. Also, check out thebarnauburn.com and covercrimson.com while you're at it. Here's to Fall Saturdays.
From the creators of The Next Round comes two new sites, covercrimson.com and thebarnauburn.com. Two team sites with the same excitement and information-driven content that you get every day on The Next Round. Live daily shows, recorded shows, free of charge, plus premium content with insider information starting at just $1. And it's the perfect gift for the Alabama or Auburn fan in your family. Covercrimson.com or thebarnauburn.com. Sign up today.
Take TNR on the go with a podcast built for your satisfaction. Miss Hour 1? Find it in podcast form. Miss Hour 2? Stream it now. Miss Hour 3? Download it for later. Miss Hour 4? Well, just know it's never coming back. Listen to TNR wherever you find podcasts.
All right, we continue on the Middle Eight. Do it every Monday morning, 8 a.m. Central Time. He is Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. I'm Ryan Brown. We got a lot to get to. The show presented by MyBookie.ag. Code Next Round to sign on, or just scan that QR code in the upper left-hand corner, MyBookie.ag. Code Next Round, upper right-hand corner. Left and right's always bothered me, Brandon. I'll learn it one day. I'm only 48. Miami lost to Georgia Tech. You felt like the Canes were just flying too close to the sun too often. Too many times. They needed a miraculous fourth. Miraculous might be a overstatement, but they needed an explosive fourth quarter to pull a game out of the fire. It's just hard to do that week after week after week.
Yeah, and they've just been leaning on Cam Ward to pull him out of the fire every single week, practically this season. And even like in the quote unquote double digit wins against Duke, which was still very much in question in the third quarter, they've had to count on Cam Ward to pull him out. Not the defense to slow things down. It's always been Cam Ward, and you can count on a incredible, great elite quarterback like him, a game breaker, for a few games in a season, but not every single week. And all of us were just kind of sitting here waiting for Miami to slip up and fall. I don't think a lot of us thought it'd be Georgia Tech, but it finally happened. And I don't know where they fell in the AP poll, but I dropped them incredibly low on my power rankings because of that performance and because of their performance throughout the season. The defense just hasn't quite been up to snuff, and what I expected going into this year, especially along the defensive line. And, you go into a game and, if you get Miami down, it's just going to be like they're going to say, Cam Ward, go out there and extend plays with your feet, and until someone gets open down the field and he's going to throw the ball, or he's going to take off running himself. And, finally someone got to him a little bit and figured it out. It's as simple as that. There's really nothing to really go into like great detail about how did Georgia Tech do it? What did they do? It's just that they have to count on Cam Ward to do something, to extend plays and to throw the ball down the field. And if you face an offense that can, one, keep the ball out of his hands a little bit, extend drives like Georgia Tech can do, and then defensively apply just enough pressure to a point where you might be able to get a sack here and force them into a turnover, especially on the road, you got a chance. 4 to 5 teams have had opportunities to beat Miami this year, and finally Georgia Tech was the one.
And now, and I'm not certain how the tiebreakers work, but they are right there with Clemson. They don't play. As long as SMU keeps winning, there's a chance Miami doesn't even make the conference championship game and get a chance to play their way into the playoffs. So to your point, Tuesday night becomes critical for Miami. They've got to see how much they get punished for that loss to Georgia Tech, because all they have left is Wake and Syracuse. They're not going to get a win that would jump them up any if somebody in front of them doesn't fall.
They need Clemson to lose at Pitt.
Possible.
And we'll see. But Pitt, Obviously, he's lost back-to-back games since being undefeated, and Eli Holstein, their quarterback, got injured and got held out of the second half this past week, and is a big reason why they lost to Virginia the way they did without Eli out there. Yeah, I mean, it's incredible to think that you could talk about a power conference team potentially be undefeated almost to the midpoint of November, could end up losing and getting to a point where they miss a expanded 12-team playoff.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's possible.
It is.
And it's because the ACC and, for that matter, the Big 12 are just weaker conferences, and that's hurting them. As much as the committee says it's just individual teams and strength of record, it's strength of conference, too, that goes a big into it. And it's those matchups, as you mentioned, not being able to play some of those top-tier teams that you're in contention with are going to end up hurting you. This is the strength of the conference.
To the Big 12, where there was nearly an upset at the top of the conference that would have thrown it into complete chaos. But let's start with the controversial game, and then we'll get to Colorado as well. Controversy in the Holy War, where Utah outplayed BYU for 58 minutes of the game. BYU's got their final drive. They're pinned down. It's 4th down in the end zone. It's almost a safety, and there's a flag on the play, defensive holding. And you're in Fayetteville, Arkansas. I'm in Birmingham. It felt like that was the distance between the camera and the hold that we got on the replay. You can't tell anything.
Yeah.
Even though Brock Osweiler, doing the game, who I respect, I think Brock does a nice job. He's, oh, yeah, I think it's a good call. I'm like, I don't know how you told that because you can't see anything on that replay. And Utah was mad. Kyle Whittingham held his tongue. His athletic director didn't. He gets popped for $40,000, but I would imagine it's the best $40,000 he's ever spent.
Maybe. I don't know. ADs make a lot of money, but not that much money. Maybe some boosters.
I would imagine some boosters. I imagine the boosters like, you go in there and you destroy those refs. He's like, you know what it's going to cost me? I don't care. You rip them up. That's when I go back to the booster and said, you remember you wanted me to do this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I wish we had jobs like that, right? Yeah, Utah dominated that game. I mean, the fourth quarter, they only had 64 yards. BYU, and 65 of them, 65 of the 64 came on that final drive because that's how good Utah was. They were hitting them behind the sticks. Was that a penalty? I don't know. I've seen multiple angles of it, including from fans in the stands, from cell phone footage. I can't really tell. So you got to go with what the official says there. And maybe Mark, I'm sure he's standing on the sideline there, probably had a better view of it, and that's why he was so pissed off. I mean, you hate to see something be the swing in the momentum of either team because of an official's ruling. And usually officials just hold that flag in their belt on key situations down the stretch. So it must have been something where just, well, that's clear cut. I got to throw the flag here. Better lucky than good sometimes. BYU got to be lucky there and stay undefeated. And, again, I'm sure the Big 12 brass are happy it resulted that way because otherwise, I mean, the Big 12 was looking like the weakest conference potentially here in the power structure and certainly looks like a one big league anyway. But at the very least, they get to hang their hat on BYU as their lone undefeated.
Yeah, and BYU is struggling right now, by the way. They've played good football, but they're only, I think, a 2.5-point favorite against Kansas at mybookie.ag. I'll confirm that in a second. But, I mean, that they feel like a team that is on borrowed time. I'm a fan. I love Reese Davis personally, but I'm a fan of what he says on game day. If you're not good enough, the loss will find you. And it feels like losses are chasing BYU right now, and they're just narrowly escaping them. Yeah,
exactly right. And Utah wasn't necessarily great either. I mean, they had 10 penalties in that game, including that final one. There are issues there with BYU, and those have been creeping up. Not as bad as what and obvious as we're seeing with Miami, for example, throughout the year. But I even go back to that late Saturday night win early in the year against Kansas State where they blew them out. Not to say that was going to be a loss because obviously they blew them out, but they had some incredible weird circumstances there in a 6.5-minute span in the middle eight where they scored 31 points because of turnovers and weird situations. And they were able to cruise off of that. They didn't really do anything offensively in the second half. They just kind of had to run the clock out because of that crazy 6.5-minute stretch. And that's really what they've been able to kind of put all their expectations on. Everybody just goes, wow, they blew out that team and they just keep winning. So yeah, let's keep them in the top 10 or put them in the top 10. And I've been hesitant to do that. I've had them just outside my top 10 and obviously, even with everything going on around them. But, it's interesting. You mentioned that about the spread against Kansas.
It's 3.5. Yeah, 3.5. And BYU's at home. That is not in.
And they're hosting them.
Yeah.
Man, and hey, listen, and credit to Kansas too. I mean, they beat the crap out of Iowa State this week.
Yep.
At home, but this BYU team isn't quite all that. And listen, man, the door's wide open in the Big 12 for someone to walk through, and I'm wondering if it might end up being Colorado.
Speaking of that Iowa State loss to Kansas now puts Colorado in control of their destiny. As it pertains to making the Big 12 championship game, and for that matter, the college football playoff. It's remarkable that we are where we are in this season. Colorado is 7-2, 5-1 after an impressive win against Texas Tech in Lubbock. And now they get Utah this week. I don't know what you get out of Utah. They're a 10-point favorite, Colorado is, for the big noon kick against Utah. This is incredible that we are where we are. I don't know if it's the best story in college football. It is certainly one of the best that Colorado is in this position right now, nearing mid-November, in control of their own destiny for absolutely everything.
Yeah, they've been under the radar quite a bit here. It's like as soon as they get success, everybody stops wanting to talk about them. Imagine that. Their defensive front has been playing so much better here of late. Travis Hunter is just a freak. I mean, what else can you say about him? He plays 100-plus snaps every game, but he played a season-high 155 snaps this past week.
Incredible.
Against Texas Tech. I don't know how he's doing it. How does any human being play that much and still be incredible and elite? He had, 99 yards receiving against Texas Tech. And I was watching the end of that game, and, Colorado had pulled away, but they were trying to run the clock out by still throwing the ball, which is very much like an air raid, like Mike Leach type to do. But that's what Colorado does. I remember I was in person covering the North Dakota State game in their season opener, and they were throwing the ball, trying to burn the clock in. Almost came back and bit them, and almost came back to bite them against Texas Tech. They end up winning by a touchdown or whatever when they were up 2 scores. But here's the other thing about Colorado. I love the way they responded on the road in a big-time environment with the tortillas being thrown at them and other things being thrown at them on the sideline. And they get down 13-0, I believe, and they are able to storm back and really dominated the game from there on out and hush that crowd. It's been a great season for them, great performance. And I think the thing to take away from this game is that the way they responded on the road against a very good Texas Tech team when they were down double digits.
In the Big Ten, Indiana dominates Michigan. Well, I shouldn't say dominate, 20-15. It felt more dominant than 20-15, frankly, but a 5-point win by Indiana over Michigan to remain undefeated. By the way, about as close as anybody's played Indiana this year, 20-15. They remain undefeated. It sets up that game next week in Columbus against Ohio State, undefeated Indiana against one-loss Ohio State. The Hoosiers, we'll see what you do with them in your Power 12 in just a moment. And you may have to tip your hand there to answer this question, but Indiana solidly in the playoff discussion. If they lose to Ohio State, we got a couple of weeks to talk about that. Do you feel like they've done enough to still solidly be in the playoff discussion?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. The strength of schedule, I should say, is not great. We all know that, but it is improving just by playing the quote-unquote likes of Michigan and obviously Ohio State on the road here in 2 weeks. Indiana's 0-30-1 in the last 31 meetings against Ohio State. They have to go on the road there. The good news for Indiana is they get a bye week to prepare. They get 2 weeks to prepare for going to Ohio State. They're going to have to rally things a little bit here. That offense in the second half was just dreadful. They only had 3 points. They had 18 total yards in the second half. And this Indiana offense has been absolutely explosive against everybody this season. They couldn't do shit in the second half, and that is really concerning to me. Where I think a lot of us expected, because of Michigan's defense, to be really the first challenge for Indiana, and the offense did not respond. And I was really disappointed in receiver Elijah Sherratt, who's their top guy, had 2 drop passes there in the fourth quarter in some big situations to kind of help put the game away potentially, and he wasn't able to do that. And he wasn't able to deliver in the big moment. Imagine if they're in a similar situation on the road in Ohio State. That puts a little bit more doubt in my mind. I mean, listen, Ohio State's going to be favored anyway in that game, but now all of a sudden we've got big questions, and everybody who's criticizing and saying, oh, Indiana's not for real, now have some validity to their arguments. They could point to this Michigan game, but still undefeated, 10-0 for the first time ever in school history, and Curt Cignetti continues to win. And to me, if they were to finish, the season with 1 loss, they're still very much in the playoff discussion. If they were to, I'm trying to remember what exactly everything looks like in the Big Ten, but at this point, if Ohio State wins that game, it's likely going to be Oregon-Ohio State for a rematch in the Big Ten championship game, unless there's a weird outcome for Oregon down the stretch, and obviously Ohio State against Michigan to close the season. But Indiana, with 1 loss, missing the Big Ten championship game, should be that 3rd team into the playoff from that conference.
Ohio State does what they're supposed to do against Purdue. Oregon does what they're supposed to do against Maryland. I thought Penn State-Washington might have a little interest just to see if Penn State lets Ohio State beat them twice. No, sir. They jump on Washington right away in Happy Valley on the whiteout game. It was never a game, 35-6. They win that thing going away. So there's a clear 4 teams, unlike the SEC, a clear 4 teams in the Big Ten. Nobody else can contend. Iowa's the next team. They're out of it.
And for some reason, if someone wants to say the Big Ten's only going to get 3 teams in, my opinion is it should be Indiana, not Penn State. I know the playoff committee in their rankings thinks differently, but I've had Indiana above Penn State last week. I still have them above Penn State this week because they are undefeated. Penn State has a loss. Their best win on their schedule right now is against Illinois. Illinois was ranked at the time. They're no longer ranked, but that's their best win. But Indiana, their strength of schedule, not great, but they're undefeated. They haven't lost yet. And if we're going to my concern is that we're going to start comparing scores. And in direct correlation to, Penn State lost by a touchdown, and then if Indiana loses to Ohio State here in 2 weeks, they're going to be comparing those scores. Just wait for that. They're going to be doing that. Someone's going to say that out loud. They're going to say the quiet part out loud, and they shouldn't.
All right, we're about to unveil Brandon's Power 12. He does a top 25 each week for CBS Sports. He gives us the first 12 on this show every Monday. A reminder, the show is presented by MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. When you sign on at MyBookie.ag, you make your initial deposit. You use code NEXTROUND, and they are going to double that deposit. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere with MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. MyBookie.ag, code NEXTROUND. Also, Roback.com. Code TNR20 helps you save 20% there on your initial purchase at Roback.com. The great golf polos, quarter zips. They've got the wonderful hoodies as well. All of that right there at Roback.com. Great for the gift-giving season. And don't forget, code TNR20 at checkout to save 20% off your initial purchase there at Roback.com. Just scan the QR code or go to Roback.com, code TNR20. All right, Brandon Marcello will unveil now his top 12 of his Power 25 there for CBS Sports. Let's get it and see what might have shaken up at the top with Georgia's loss. A lot. Oregon still your number 1. Ohio State your number 2. Texas 3. And I asked the question about Indiana. You got them right there at number 4.
Yeah, rise for Indiana. I had them above Penn State last week. They still remain there. I'm not changing that because of a double-digit win by Penn State against Washington at home. Indiana's undefeated. They should be rewarded for that. They've played the schedule that was handed to them. They've won every game except for this last one by 14 points or more. They've dominated everybody, even Michigan, and they never really felt in danger against Michigan. So, yes, Indiana's number 4 for me.
5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 5, 6, 7, 8 go this way. Notre Dame, Tennessee, Penn State, Alabama. It's a team you've had outside your 12 at points this year, and they are back up solidly in the middle of your top 12.
Yeah, last two performances, absolutely elite defensively, and then going to LSU into their house. I know that they're struggling at quarterback, but they absolutely dominated them. Deserve to be in the top 10, should be close to the top 8. I don't know where the playoff committee will put them, but very much in the playoff race. If they continue to win here, they'll make it.
And at the bottom of your top 12, you got a couple of teams that have been high in this thing, clinging for life now. Ole Miss deservedly up to number 9, but they're at 10 and 11. You got BYU and Georgia, SMU sneaking in at 12, but BYU and Georgia just hanging on for dear life for you right now.
Yeah, especially BYU. As we mentioned earlier, they're struggling a little bit too much against everybody, and I think that they've been able to hang their hat all season on that win against Kansas State. Was kind of a freak circumstances, and you just get the feeling they got another loss coming for whatever reason, and they'll probably eliminate themselves. It doesn't matter in the Big 12 at this point. You got to win the Big 12 championship to get in. It's going to be a one-bid league.
And no Miami. SMU, your highest-ranked ACC team at number 12. No Miami. The Canes fall all the way out for you after that loss at Tech.
And they're not in the top 15 either.
Whoa. Brandon punishing Miami on this Monday. All right, you can see all that at CBSSports.com. Follow Brandon on social media at BMarcello. He's 24/7 Sports at CBS Sports. Thank you to MyBookie. MyBookie.ag, code next round to double your initial deposit. And also Roback.com, code TNR20 for 20% off your initial order. Have a great week, Brandon. We'll see you next week. It is the Middle 8 with Brandon Marcello of CBS Sports and 24/7 Sports. Wherever you're watching or listening, the next round is next. More college football for the next 3 hours on the next round. Stay with us.